He
happy
became
birthday, David.
a celebrity
Jesse.
in America when he turned
Yes,
his
happy birthday. Your wallet was the focus in Washington today as the president makes his pick for a new Federal Reserve chair. This is House Republicans finally revealed their long-awaited plan for tax reform. This is Special Report.
Never miss an episode. Special Report is up next. Here we go.
Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. President Trump makes his pitch for an economy on the ascent, introducing his nominee to lead the Federal Reserve today, and a push for Congress to get tax reform to his desk by Thanksgiving. The president literally sealing his proposal with a kiss today, as you see, while meeting with members of Congress and touting tax cuts, major reform, and more jobs. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us live on the North Lawn with a look at a very busy day at the White House. Not unusual. Good evening, John.
As always, just another day, as we like to say, Bret. It was a chance that the president had waited a long time for, and this was the opportunity to finally put some detail on his principles for tax reform in what was a day of talking up the economy at the White House.
Cuts, major reform, and more jobs.
President Trump had his mind on money and money on his mind today, introducing his nominee for Fed chairman in the Rose Garden.
My honor to announce my nomination of Jerome Powell.
Welcoming a huge company back to the U.S. in the Oval Office.
Broadcom Limited is moving its headquarters from Singapore back to the United States.
And huddling with members of the House Ways and Means Committee in the Cabinet room.
I'd like to thank the Republican members of the House Ways and Means Committee.
Great to have you here with us.
The president got most, if not all, of what he was looking for in the tax reform legislation. The tax rates, personal and corporate, preservation of 401k contributions, elimination of the death tax and AMT, and more. The only compromise was on state and local tax deductions, which are subject to a cap.
We're working to give the American people a giant tax cut for Christmas. We are giving them a big, beautiful Christmas present in the form of a tremendous tax cut. It will be the biggest cut in the history of our country. It'll also be tax reform, and it'll create jobs.
While the tax package will likely undergo substantial changes, President Trump was thrilled with the outline and the mock postcard-sized tax returns Chairman Kevin Brady brought along. The president is pushing the House for rapid approval, though the Ways and Means chairman seemed unsure about that.
It will be the biggest cut in the history of our country.
Have a bill on my desk, hopefully, Kevin, by Thanksgiving.
The president's pick for Fed chairman likely faces an easier ride than the tax bill. Jerome Powell was already twice confirmed for the Fed Board of Governors with bipartisan support. Powell's financial philosophy is very much in the vein of current chair Janet Yellen, slow and steady with no dramatic jumps in interest rates. Powell is the first nominee in 4 decades without a PhD in economics, though he brings vast experience in the private financial sector to the job.
He understands what truly drives American success, the innovation, hard work, and dreams of the American people.
Inside the Federal Reserve, we understand that monetary policy decisions matter for American families and communities.
The president was also still focused on Tuesday's terror attack in New York City, specifically the diversity visa program that allowed the killer into the country.
I'm calling on Congress to immediately terminate the diversity visa lottery program. It's a disaster for our country.
President Trump claims the program is unsafe for the nation, that applicants aren't properly vetted, even though they are subject to an in-person interview with a consular officer. In an interview with Laura Ingraham airing tonight, the president also said he wants to end so-called chain migration, which allows visa winners to bring in other family members.
Chain migration, where his whole family comes in. His mother can come in, his father, his grandmother, everybody comes in. Chain migration is a disaster for this country, and it's going to end.
As to how he will get Congress to end chain migration, President Trump also told Laura Ingraham that he wants to make that a condition of allowing the so-called dreamers to stay in the country as part of a DACA fix.
John Roberts, live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. More jobs jobs,
comes
bigger
in. His
paychecks,
mother
and
can
relief
come in,
from a
his
complicated
father,
tax system.
grandmother,
That is the
everybody
promise
comes in.
from House Republicans
Chain
today
migration
as
is
they
a
rolled out
disaster for
their
this
much
country, and it's
anticipated
gonna
tax
end.
reform plan. But as Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel reports on what's in the plan, why Democrats are already blasting the proposal.
Republican leaders are calling it a bold, pro-growth plan to revamp the tax code and simplify the lives of the American people.
Over 90% of Americans will be able to fill out their taxes on a postcard.
It would lower individual rates for low and middle income Americans to 0%, 12%, 25%, and 35%, while maintaining the highest rate at 39.6%. Increase the standard deduction, roughly doubling the amount. Establish a new family credit, which includes expanding the child tax credit from $1,000 to $1,600.
The typical family of four will save $1,182 a year on their taxes.
On the business side, it would lower the corporate rate, drop from 35% to 20%, cut the tax rate on small business income to 25%, and eliminate incentives that reward companies for sending jobs, profits, and manufacturing facilities overseas. But the Ways and Means chairman says his focus is on the local job creators.
For that Main Street business, making $62,000 a year, working day and night and weekends, a tax cut of over $3,000.
Prominent Democrats are already on the attack.
What they give you with one hand, they take away with the other. This is a shell game, a Ponzi scheme that corporate America will perpetrate on the American people.
In response to complaints from lawmakers in high-tax states, it would repeal the deduction for state and local income and sales taxes. It would allow a deduction for property tax up to $10,000.
The proposal to eliminate the state and local tax deduction is a geographic redistribution of wealth. You're taking more money from a place like New York in order to pay for a deeper tax cut elsewhere.
And after President Trump rejected a possible change, this plan allows individuals to contribute $18,000 a year in pre-tax money to their 401k retirement accounts. Now there's pressure on House leadership to deliver.
So the political will among the members here in the House, as shown by the members of the Ways and Means Committee, is ironclad to get this done.
That political will be tested as lobbyists and special interests fight for the tax code cutouts. But a number of Republican lawmakers tell me they are genuinely excited to get started on this huge agenda item. Bret?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. Much more on this with the panel. What do you think at home? Do you believe Congress can get tax reform passed by Thanksgiving, by the end of the year? Let me know on Twitter at Bret Baier. You can use the hashtag Special Report, or on Facebook at facebook.com/BretBaierSR. The markets finished the day mixed. The Dow finished up 81. The S&P 500 gained a fraction. The Nasdaq dropped 2. Details continue to emerge about the terror suspect now charged for mowing down innocent people with a rental truck Tuesday in New York City. Senior correspondent Eric Sean reports from New York at Facebook.com/BretBaierSR.
They died from blunt force trauma of the head, torso, and extremities. Manner of death, reports the New York City Medical Examiner. Homicide. That, as authorities say, Sayfullo Saipov was inspired by ISIS, planned the terror attack in the last 2 months, and had saved 90 ISIS videos on his cell phone and nearly 4,000 photos of ISIS atrocities. In the rented pickup truck, he left ISIS literature, knives, and a stun gun, and prosecutors say he targeted the carnage for Halloween so he could hit more people and plan to kill even more on the Brooklyn Bridge.
I consider a suspect an enemy of New York City and someone who did great harm to the people of the city and to folks who were visiting us.
Court papers say Saipov rented another pickup truck from Home Depot to practice the attack, and this may be it. A photo taken by Saipov's neighbor across the street showing a similar truck parked in front of Saipov's home on October 22nd, the day of that rental. Saipov, who appeared disheveled, handcuffed, and his feet shackled in his wheelchair during his court appearance, is said to want to hang an ISIS flag in his hospital room and is proud of what he allegedly did. That prompted the White House to at first consider classifying him as an enemy combatant who could be shipped to Gitmo, but President Trump backed away from that.
Terrorists should know this. This administration will use all lawful tools at our disposal, including prosecution in Article 3 courts or at Guantanamo Bay. If anyone anyone has any doubt about it, they can ask the more than 500 criminals whom the Department of Justice has convicted of terrorism-related offenses since 9/11.
U.S. Attorney June Kim, who brought the federal charges, says the classification can always be added.
As I understand it, the determination of someone being declared an enemy combatant is one that gets made way above my pay grade.
This afternoon, New York City started placing concrete barriers on the bike path intersections to prevent a similar tragedy. And tonight, people are continuing to place flowers where the victims fell. And as the bikers and joggers return to this bike path on this beautiful fall evening, we're reminded once again that this spot has joined the tragic growing list of terrorist attack locations in our country. As for Saipov, he will be back in federal court on November 15th. Bret.
Eric Shawn live in New York. Eric, thank you. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is pushing for Congress to renew an intelligence gathering program in the wake of Tuesday's terror attack in New York. The Section 702 program allows intelligence agencies to legally monitor emails and phone calls of foreign nationals outside the U.S.
I'm calling today on Congress to reauthorize Section 702. It is critical to what we do. Today, with the international terrorist threat decentralized and increasingly online, it is more important than ever that we have this capability.
The Section 702 program is set to expire at the end of the year. As we mentioned, President Trump is backing off a threat to send the suspect in the New York bike path attack to Guantanamo Bay. But for a president who has championed the use of that prison, what gives? At least one prominent senator and recent Trump ally wants to know. Correspondent Doug McKelway reports.
Mr. President, do you want the assailant from New York sent to get
I would certainly consider that, yes.
A day after Wednesday's impromptu remarks, President Trump was backtracking on sending suspect Sayfullo Saipov to Guantanamo Bay, tweeting this morning, statistically, that process takes much longer than going through the federal system. He added, there was also something appropriate about keeping him in the home of the horrible crime he committed. Should move fast. Death penalty. Yet the White House still considers Saipov to be an enemy combatant.
That will allow you to question him, the military, without a right to counsel, because under the law of war, there is no right to counsel when you're being questioned by the military as an enemy soldier.
Gitmo has become a symbol over how to serve justice to enemies who wear no uniform and represent no country. For 8 years, the Obama administration tried to close it.
If you can try Timothy McVeigh in the U.S., you can try other terrorists here too. But it was also used as a terrorist propaganda tool, that we saw multiple terrorist groups use the existence of the Guantanamo Bay facility to recruit new members.
It never was closed, but through repatriation during the Bush and Obama administrations, its population declined from a high of 684 to 41. No new detainees have been sent there since 2008.
The Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States.
In its 2004 Hamdi versus Rumsfeld decision, the Supreme Court ruled the government has the right to detain enemy combatants, but that they must have the right to challenge enemy combatant status before an impartial authority. Last year, the Chief Defense Counsel for Military Commissions said those due process rights are often abused.
Yeah, they promised them that the meeting rooms that they meet their clients in aren't bugged. Well, they have that.
Republicans, including then-Senator Jeff Sessions, complained loudly during the Obama administration about trying terrorism suspects in federal courts. Today, he touted the Justice Department's record of 500 terrorist convictions in federal courts. Bret?
Doug, thank you. The fate of Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl is now in the hands of a judge. Army Colonel Jeffrey Nance is reviewing the evidence in the Bergdahl desertion case. Bergdahl's attorneys asked for no prison time, while prosecutors requested he spend more than a decade behind bars. The special counsel's investigation into Russian meddling during the election has a new target, Fox News has learned tonight. This, on the same day, President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, and his business associate, Rick Gates, were back in court following Monday's indictment as part of the special counsel's investigation. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge was at the court earlier today and joins us with what we're learning tonight. Good evening, Catherine.
Thank you, Bret. Fox News has learned a pro-Trump nonprofit America First Policies recently received
received a special counsel request to preserve its records in the event the records are needed by federal investigators. The request came in the last 10 days. Rick Gates helped found the nonprofit. He is also a business partner of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Both men were indicted by the special counsel earlier this week on charges of money laundering, conspiracy, and failing to register with the U.S. government for their work on behalf of the Ukraine. The men pleaded not guilty to those charges. Both men and their legal teams were at the district court in Washington today. They want their clients off GPS monitoring and released from home detention. Government argues the men are a flight risk. The issue will be taken up again on Monday. After former Trump campaign aide George Papadopoulos at this March 2016 National Security meeting with then-Senator Jeff Sessions, among others, pled guilty to lying to federal investigators over his efforts to set up meetings between candidate Trump and Russian government officials, including President Vladimir Putin. Congressional investigators want Attorney General Sessions to clarify his June testimony to the Senate Intelligence Committee. The issue will be taken up again
I have
on
never
Monday.
met with or had any conversation with any Russians or any foreign officials concerning any type of interference with any campaign or election in the United States. Further, I have no knowledge of any such conversations by anyone connected to the Trump campaign.
Tim Clovis, who also participated in the March National Security meeting, withdrew his nomination at the Agriculture Department today. In a letter to the president, writing, "The relentless assaults on you and your team seem to be a blood sport that only increases in intensity each day. I don't want to be a distraction or negative influence, particularly with so much important work left to do for the American people." Fox News has also learned that Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigators probed who brought Papadopoulos and another foreign policy advisor, Carter Page, into the Trump campaign and what role Clovis played in that effort. A lawyer for Clovis said he always vigorously was against any Russian trip for Mr. Trump and anyone on the campaign team. Bret.
Captain, thank you. Next, 1 year after the presidential election, a shocking story about a rigged democratic system told the former head of the Democratic National Committee skewers Hillary Clinton in a new book about the 2016 election. As Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen reports, Donna Brazile now charges the system was rigged against insurgent candidate Bernie Sanders.
You wanted to try to get reaction on the Donna Brazile revelations this morning, Mr. Sanders?
Senator Bernie Sanders had no comment on Donna Brazile, former interim Democratic National Committee chair, whose forthcoming memoir alleges in an excerpt in Politico that under her predecessor, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, quote, the DNC was rigging the system to throw the primary to Hillary.
Against insurgent candidate Bernie Sanders.
The great convention that we've had.
Brazile reports the Clinton campaign raised $10 million to retire 80% of the party's bank debt, but exacted a steep price. The agreement, Brazile writes, signed by Amy Dacey, the former CEO of the DNC, and Robbie Mook of the Clinton campaign, with a copy to the campaign's general counsel, Mark Elias, specified that in exchange for raising money and investing in the DNC, Hillary would control the party's finances, strategy, and all the money raised. Her campaign had the right of refusal of who would be the party communications director, and it would make final decisions on all the other staff. The DNC also was required to consult with the campaign about all other staffing, budgeting, data, analytics, and mailings. This Victory Fund agreement had been signed in August 2015, just 4 months after Hillary announced her candidacy, and nearly a year before she officially had the nomination.
There were lots of things that were shocking about it. One, the financial condition of the DNC. Two, the way the DNC then had to rely on the Clinton campaign for the money and the resources to continue even operating.
In a statement, Wasserman Schultz told Fox News she is proud of her work at DNC and urged Democrats to remain focused on a progressive agenda.
Madam Secretary, any response to what Donna Brazile is saying?
The Clinton campaign did not respond to our query, nor would the Federal Elections Commission disclose whether it is investigating Brazile's allegations. Brazile said she searched for other evidence of a rigged primary and found none.
I'll be asking some questions as well, along with my friend Roland Martin of TV One.
Yet the excerpt neglects to mention that Brazile used her dual role as a CNN commentator to steer CNN debate questions to Clinton in advance. For months, Brazile denied having done so.
Where did you get it?
You know, as a Christian woman, I understand persecution, but I will not sit here and be persecuted because your information is totally false.
But in an essay for Time magazine last May, Brazile belatedly acknowledged having done so and called it a mistake she'll regret forever. The DNC's new leadership told reporters they've restructured the party's fundraising and are now committed to electing Democrats every year in every zip code. Bret?
James, thank you. More on this with the panel. Construction of the Dwight D. Eisenhower National Memorial officially got underway today with a ceremonial groundbreaking. Family members of the late president and lawmakers were on hand to turn the first scoops of dirt at the site of the 4-acre memorial honoring our nation's 34th president and World War II Allied commander. The $150 million monument near the Air and Space Museum, it's actually in front of the Department of Education, is anticipated to be finished by May of 2020 on the 75th anniversary of the surrender of Nazi Germany in World War II. I have written about Eisenhower in a book, 3 Days in January, Dwight Eisenhower's final mission, about the final 3 days of his administration and how he formed his farewell address. That's coming out in paperback soon. I've also got a new book on the way, 3 Days in Moscow, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of the Soviet Empire. The cover hit book sites today. We're proud of it. It's about Ronald Reagan's battle to end the Cold War, framed around the historic 3-day 1988 Moscow summit. This book is out May 2018, so be on the lookout for that. We may still be talking about Russia. Up next, whether North Korea should be lumped in with Iran, Sudan, and Syria, a big decision ahead of a big trip. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 31 in Denver, where the suspect in the shooting of 3 people at a suburban Walmart is in custody about 14 hours after he ran from the store. Police credit surveillance video and a tip from the public for helping them identify the suspect. Police say the shooting appears to have been random. Fox 4 in Dallas, where the future of Confederate statues in that city remains up in the air. The Dallas City Council planned to make a decision this week, but now plans to study options for the monuments and report back next year. And this is a live look at San Diego from Fox 5. The big story there tonight, drivers across California are protesting the state's increase in the gas tax by 12 cents per gallon. Drivers now pay almost 42 cents in just taxes per gallon of gas. And electric vehicles aren't out of the woods either. They will be required to pay a $100 annual fee in coming years. It's all part of the plan to pay for transportation projects there. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway. The State Department will miss its deadline on whether to redesignate North Korea a state sponsor of terrorism. Correspondent Rich Edson joins us live from the State Department tonight with why the Secretary of State is delaying this decision. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Bret. And the congressional deadline is in less than 6 hours. Sources say the State Department will miss that. Officials say they want to keep a possible designation as an option heading into negotiations next week between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. At the White House this afternoon, a National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, offered a case to designate North Korea.
Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Bret. And the congressional deadline is in less than 6 hours. Sources say the State Department will miss
using
that.
nerve
Officials say
agent
they want to keep a
and a despotic leader who murders his brother in that manner.
Next week,
I mean, that's clearly an act of terrorism that fits in with the range
of nerve agent, a despotic leader, someone who murders his brother in public, building the case essentially that North Korea is a state sponsor of terrorism, though that has fallen short, at least here right now, of the official designation. The State Department says it's determining whether North Korea meets the legal definition of a state sponsor of terrorism. It's essentially that it has repeatedly supported acts of international terrorism. So if so, U.S. law then would automatically implement additional sanctions against North Korea. Now, while there are concerns about escalating an already tense situation between the United States and North Korea, there is strong bipartisan congressional push for Secretary Tillerson to relist North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. That it has repeatedly supported acts of international terrorism.
In 2008, it was changed, but it was changed because we were willing to remove that designation in exchange for them making certain commitments on their nuclear program that they did not keep.
Pence and state and vice president will skip a trip to the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea Korea. According to that official, those visits are just becoming cliche. Back to you.
Rich Edson, live at the State Department. Rich, thank you. We will be taking special report on the road next week, and not just down the road. I'll be anchoring live from Asia all next week with stops in Tokyo, Seoul, and Beijing as President Trump travels to the region. It all starts this coming Sunday with a bonus 6 p.m. Eastern edition of Special Report from Tokyo, and then an exclusive interview with the Japanese Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, Monday. Rich, thank you. We will be ISIS is on the run, but that isn't always a good thing. Correspondent Benjamin Hall reports tonight on how weeding out terrorism has led to terror back home as President Trump travels to the region.
The black flag of ISIS drew people from across the world, but now as the caliphate crumbles, many are trying to return home, posing a major threat. It was returning jihadis who carried out attacks in Paris and Brussels and who arrived hidden among the waves of refugees flowing into Europe. Now it's feared others may follow. This British man, speaking anonymously from a safe house in northern Syria, is one of the many trying to get home.
Like I said, I'm not here to harm anybody. I'm just here to look after my family and live my life.
After attending ISIS training camps, he says he ran away from the terror group and now wants to leave.
Day, like I'm just trying to get my life back. If it's so be it, I have to go to prison in order to do that, and I'm prepared to do that.
And prison does await those who return to the UK after fighting in Syria or Iraq. 400 are already said to have returned, though only 14 have been convicted. But France has a very different approach: eliminate them. It's been widely reported that French special forces actively hunt French jihadis on the battlefield before they come home. Fox News spoke to a former operative in a French jihadi kill squad. He explained why.
It simplifies things. If we kill them abroad, that resolves the problem of what we do when they return. That is what France is doing.
As evidenced by the attacks in Brussels, Martinet says countries cannot take the risk of allowing them back, and that de-radicalization just never works.
Jihadis who have fought in Syria and returned to Europe are like grenades with the pins pulled out. They may well kill at any time.
The US agrees that ISIS fighters should be dealt with in the region, not back home.
We prevent them from leaving, and we can defeat them here, and that's exactly what we want to do.
In London, Benjamin Hall, Fox News.
Up next, the Republican plan for tax reform and whether they can actually get that across the finish line. First, beyond our borders tonight, a United Nations report finds ISIS committed several international crimes, including using civilians as human shields during the Iraqi military's 9-month campaign to liberate the city of Mosul. The report published today documents everything from the mass abduction of civilians to the international targeting of their residences and is based on witness testimony. Meantime, fighting between Turkish security force members and Kurdish militants kills 8 security force members today. The clashes near Turkey's border with Iraq are part of a decades-long conflict with the rebels of the Kurdistan Workers' Party that has killed tens of thousands of people. A very tense situation. And an incredible find in one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Scientists say they have found a large hidden chamber in the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The purpose of that space is not yet clear. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders.
The Act will deliver real relief for people in the middle, people who are also striving to get there.
We will grow our economy by delivering more jobs, fair taxes, and bigger paychecks to Americans of all walks of life.
For every member, this could really become the most significant bill they ever make a decision in their term.
I really believe we'll have it done before Christmas. I consider that to be one of the great Christmas presents.
This is a shell game, a Ponzi scheme that corporate America will perpetrate on the American people.
In short, the bill's like a fish. If it stays out in the sunlight too long, it stinks.
This could really become the most
There you have it. Okay, the GOP bill is out on the House side, and here's what it looks like. Individually, lowers tax rates to 12, 25, 35%, maintains the current top rate, 39.6 for high-income Americans, doubles the standard deduction to $12,000 for single filers, $24,000 for married couples, establishes a new family credit, which includes increasing the child tax credit from $1,000 to $1,600, no changes to pre-tax treatment of 401k plans, eliminates deductions for state and local income and sales taxes, and that could be a problem for some congressmen. On the corporate side, goes from 35% to 20%. New maximum tax rate on pass-through business income, 25%. That's down from 39.6%. Eliminates incentives that reward companies for sending jobs, profits, manufacturing facilities overseas. Repeals corporate alternative minimum tax. The question is, will any Democrats sign on to this plan? That could be a problem for some congressmen.
There are moderate Democrats, centrist Democrats, who, given time, I think, will not defend the status quo. They're seeing the same jobs leave this country as we are. I believe that we can gain Democrat support for work to do that. But I know this, man, I would hate to be standing there saying what we have for a tax code is just fine, because it's not.
House Ways and Means Committee Chairman with Neil Cavuto earlier today. Let's bring in our panel. Charles Hurt, opinion editor for the Washington Times. A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics and host of No Labels Radio on Sirius XM. And Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review. A.B., Republicans on the House seem proud of it. Republicans in the Senate seem leery of it. What I heard today was that don't think this is going to be the end result, and maybe we'll have our own.
It's a work in progress, and the fighting has just begun. There was a lot of disagreement in coming to this day. There was a delay of a day, but it's a very ambitious deadline for the forces that are against it. You still have a lot of people fighting for the state and local tax deduction. There is some of it there, but every time you give back a deduction, if they were to do that, if they were to fold in something like that, which is $1.2 trillion they need in pay-fors, you need to find another pay-for. The realtors are upset. There's a lot of forces saying that you're just incentivizing home purchases and home values, and it's just there's just a lot of fight left that we're going to see. Everyone knows from the healthcare battle that there's a 2-seat margin in the Senate. Very, very tough odds over there. So, are they going to pass something? I absolutely believe that they are. Is it going to happen by Christmas? I don't think so.
Interesting that I heard that Senator Orrin Hatch, who's kind of running point over on the Senate side, said he would not move forward until the markup on the House is finished. In other words, they were going to do them both at the same time and say, ta-da, but this was going to say this one first, and then we'll take the best of and maybe make it a little bit better.
Yeah, because they don't want to get out ahead on anything that they then pay a price for and then don't actually get the benefits from. But I think that what Kevin McCarthy said there is the most. The thing Kevin McCarthy said, where he said every member, this could be the most significant bill they ever make a decision on in their term. And I think that is very, very true. This has become an absolute political imperative for Republicans. They have to get something done, and I think I agree with AB that it is going to change a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of negotiation on the state and local taxes thing and other issues. But if they don't get something that they can hang their hat on, it's going to be they're going to be doomed, I think.
Jonah.
I think that's right. I mean, God said that fish got to swim and that Republicans have to cut taxes, right? And if you can't have them do this, then what's the point of having Republicans? It is absolutely true that the lobbyists are storming Capitol Hill like Caddy Day at the Bushwood Country Club and Caddyshack, right? Just storming in like crazy, and it's going to be nuts. And there's some things I think are really bad in it, like getting rid of the adoption tax credit or deduction. I think is nuts, and I think that'll be restored. But on the corporate side, I think it's really good. And on the pass-through stuff, it's very convoluted. But the real challenge here is that cutting taxes is easy because it only creates winners. Maybe not enough winners, maybe you wanted to be one of the winners and you're not. But tax reform means creating winners and losers. And some people are going to have to lose some goodies in all of this, and that makes it really tough.
So who's Judge Smells? No, I'm just kidding. All right, so Democrats that came out early against this, even before it was rolled out. Kamala Harris tweeted, on average, middle-class families earning less than $86,000 would see a tax increase under the Republican tax reform plan. Bob Casey, the average tax increase on families nationwide earning $86,100 would be $794. Jeff Merkley, under the GOP plan, the U.S. families making $86,000 see an average increase $794. This could pay for 1 month of child care, 8.2 months of electric bills, in Oregon. Problem was, 2 of those 3 were deleted, by the way. The Washington Post gave it 4 Pinocchios. In their haste to condemn the GOP tax plan, Democrats have spread far and wide the false claim that families making less than $86,100 on average will face a hefty tax hike. Actually, it's the opposite. Most families in that income range would get a tax cut. Any Democrat who spread this claim should delete their tweets and make clear they were in error. 2 out of those 3 did delete the tweets, by the way.
Democrats, I think, are too quick to oppose this basically because it's been a partisan process, and Republicans decided early on they were going to use the word that everyone's heard all year, reconciliation instructions, to basically have a Republican-only bill. I think if that were to fail, and it might, and I think it probably could, Democrats will come to the table. I don't know how many Democrats will end up supporting it, but right now it's not a bipartisan process. It's a partisan process, so they feel very liberated to just bash it and say
let's just take a second to explain that. So for reconciliation, to get 50 votes plus 1, you have to have certain guidelines to be able to do that in the Senate. And one of them is it cannot increase the deficit or debt. There's also other guidelines called the Byrd Rule that makes basically how you fit this circle peg into the circle hole. There are some restrictions that House members, Charlie, are not going to like when they, when push comes to shove, if something wants to get, if they want to change it, there are very strict rules to get that 50 votes. So you have to get Democrats to sign on to get 60 votes to pass it.
And of course, the House Republicans have long nursed a grudge against House Senate Republicans because for those very reasons, because they'll take those bad votes and send it over to the Senate, and then the Senate mucks it up or is not able to get it done despite having the majority. But I think we're still a long ways away from actually Democrats, and I think this is a scandal, and I think it's the most important thing that people should be talking about. The fact that Democrats, there are plenty of Democrats whose constituents would benefit from a lot of these tax adjustments, in particular the state and local taxes exemption. And for them to sit on the sidelines and refuse to participate, I think it says so much about them, and it may be one of the ways to get them to come to the table is to have get what you can get done now, and then have an election and beat them, and then get them back to the table after that.
The other interesting thing is if you use reconciliation, the tax cuts or reform, whatever you want to call it, can only last 10 years. It has to sunset. If you get 60 votes, like they did in 1986, they could potentially last forever unless somebody comes in, another president, and changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah, it's hard to see the 60-vote thing happening for all the partisan reasons that we've been talking about, but also that this really is a red state tax reform in a lot of ways, and the red state, blue state divide is much more acute in terms of the state and local taxes in the Senate than it is in the House. California, they're going to be against it. They're in the pocket of a lot of their donors who tend to be upscale. I'm very skeptical they're going to come up with something that gets 60 votes in the Senate.
All right, so does it overall happen before Christmas?
This really is a red state tax. Before Christmas, no, but it does happen.
No, but it does happen.
I think there's a fair chance that it can happen before, but it's not going to be as ambitious as I think I want, and I think a lot of people want.
2 out of 3. Next out, the fallout from Donna Brazil's bashing of the DNC.
They're going to come up with something that gets 60